as you can see here, and I've talked about this before, how BitTensor is very much like what Ethereum was to the dApp network, or the dApp world, decentralized applications. Once Ethereum launched its EVM and allowed projects to build their Web3 apps on it, on top of the Ethereum network, that started basically DeFi 1.0. And obviously there are all sorts of businesses and projects that have launched on top of Ethereum that have done really, really well. And as a result of that, Ethereum has also done well, because everyone had to use use their network, and ETH was using gas fees, all that sort of stuff. And so when the subnets were launched in October, November time, this was a real game changer. But there have been some issues which, I mean, they weren't big issues, but yeah, they've been rectified. So just a quick recap in how the whole thing works. So you have the user over there on the left hand side, and they will be interacting with one of the subnets, and there's all sorts of subnets out there, from text prompting to image to whatever, and there's 32 subnets at the moment. Some we don't know what they are because they're just started out, but they're attacking every single part of the AI world that you can think of. It's got a ChatGPT equivalent, it's got a Midjourney DALL-E 3 equivalent, it's got all sorts and more. So let's just say a user's trying to interact with an image prompter. Okay, so where it says there on the left, user sends inference request. Let's say it's putting in a request to, give me a picture of a fluffy bunny. It then goes to the validator, and that validator then sends that request to the miners. Now, a miner is not like a Bitcoin miner. It's someone that's sat there on a computer or a server, and they've got a specific image generation algorithm that they're running. So yeah, let's just use the image generation for this example. So the validator puts out this request to all of the miners within that subnet and says, hey, someone give me a picture of a fluffy bunny, go. Now the miners quickly then send their results, as in fluffy bunnies, to the validators, not just one validator, to lots of validators within that subnet. And then, as it says here, validators rank miner outputs. So the validators will also be running another algorithm, and that algorithm will basically be ranking how good the fluffy bunnies are. Now, you don't necessarily need to run an algorithm. You, as a validator, could just sit there going, yeah, that's good, that's not good. You could do it manually. Obviously, it's not efficient, and you'd be very slow compared to the validators that have algorithms doing it. But that's in essence what happens. So it then goes to the miners are then ranked. There's like a little leaderboard, and the miners that are higher ranked get more money. And I'm going to say money loosely here. TAO, basically a higher allocation of TAO. The top outputs are returned to the user. And by the way, when I say the top outputs, you can generate 256 images in a second using this very young image network. But anyway, the user gets it, and that's the whole thing. So what then happens is, looking at the far right hand side, the rankings of those miners are posted to the blockchain, and yeah, then as it says, miners refer to rankings to improve the model. So other miners, so if a miner suddenly starts winning everything and starts getting all the rewards because their outputs are best, well, people then look in that miner's algorithm or that model and go, oh, okay, I'm going to use that now. And so this is, remember what I talked about BitTensor originally, what they're obsessed with is using the biggest incentive mechanism known to humankind, which is reward, as in literally payment incentives and open, fair competition. So what this means is, just like with the Bitcoin mining world. Sorry, there's background noise. I'm just going to mute everyone again. Stand by. So so in the Bitcoin mining world, just like how it's open and fair competition, to get the block rewards, etc. The way that you compete in the Bitcoin mining world is just basically get a better ASIC or get more ASIC, so you have a higher hash rate in your pool or in your your mining house. The way that but in BitTensor, let's take this image example. A way to get better as a miner, is to basically improve the algorithm. So the better algorithm gives you better outputs, etc. And people can copy your algorithm. And so it's incentivizing people to really work on innovation and making that algorithm better and better. To the point where if you look at the whole open source world, just in 2023, the amount of innovation and progression it had in the open source world is just immense. So if you look at January when ChatGPT 3 came out, obviously it was all closed because OpenAI owns it all, blah blah blah. But within 6 months, you could get a chat via the open source network. You could get a text prompt generator just like ChatGPT 3, as good as the original ChatGPT 3, and put it on your own hard drive. You can put it on a USB stick, and that free open source software was as good as GPT-3 when it was first launched. So open source is there. It is going to be gobbling up all of these centralized, private, closed door hubs. And this is why BitTensor is why I'm so goddamn bullish on it, because it's utilizing the open source powerhouse that the world is moving on, and it's using incentives and open, fair competition to improve itself. So this is how BitTensor works in essence, and how a particular subnet works. Now all of a sudden, Const, so Const is one of the co-founder or the main founder of BitTensor. He announced this as part of an interview, this 6-minute video explaining a new update to BitTensor. Okay, so I will play this because I know not everyone here has listened to it. And if it confuses the hell out of you, don't worry, I'm going to break down everything he says. So just sit back and have a little listen.
Rather than root validators who are selecting winners and losers in terms of subnets. So currently we have a system that is fairly permissioned, where a small group of people do the due diligence and properly. I mean, I don't think we've done a very bad job. I think we've done a decently good job, but it's not a good long-term solution. It was used as a bootstrapping technique to allow for subnets to be selected based on their performance and value add to the ecosystem. But we want to change that so that there is an open market mechanism which determines whether or not a subnet lives or dies, and also whether or not they accrue TAO emission. In order to do that, we took the original bonding mechanism from human consensus, that if you look at the metagraph.b, you'll see the bonds. We took those bonds and we abstracted them as individual tokens that would be represented inside of each subnet. Now, this revolution in the way of which value is accrued on the chain solves a variety of problems. So for one, it makes it so that everybody can participate in the selection criteria, or selection process for subnets. It means that we create a exponential increase in the number of large holders of in a particular subnet. So there'll be 64 to the power of 64 whales that can call themselves validators across the subnets, and that's a really important reason for why we're doing this. It also means that the subnet owners and creators and miners and validators will be better aligned to maintain, improve, be up to date with the technologies they're building, because currently there's a certain laziness amongst the validators who don't gain or lose that much based on whether or not they validate properly or not properly across the subnets. There's very meager variance in the dividends accrued by good or bad validators. It also is a potential solution to weight copying, since right now the reason why validators are simply not interested in performing the difficult task of validating across all these subnets is that they're not properly aligned. That's another reason for introducing this mechanism. It allows us to have proper indexes select winners, and also punish losers and teams that are not performing well within inside of the ecosystem. So we're going to remove a lot of the lethargy in the way in which subnets are created. Those are the major reasons, and it's a very exciting change. So how is it going to be performed? I've spoken about this a number of times in the last hour or so, but it's worth going over again. So on the creation of a subnet, there is a lock cost currently. That lock cost, instead of being locked until the subnet is deregistered, will go into the left-hand side of a liquidity pool, and on the right-hand side will be a multiple of 32 times as much subnet token plus outstanding a subnet token, multiple of 32 times the initial TAO that was put into the subnet, distributed to the owner. So the owner is given a convertible amount of the subnet token on launch, which they can distribute back through the swapping protocol to return their tokens if they so wish. This becomes the initial supply of the subnet tokens, and then immediately after this point, emission continues in the subnet, with half of the emission going into the pool and the other half going through the mechanism via human consensus and as normal, so that miners and validators accrue the other half of the emission. The emission curve will be exactly the same as Bitcoin's, which is the same as TAO's, which is 21 million capped with 4-year halving cycles. One of the beautiful things about this is that if you want to be a whale in a subnet, you will mine it early and hold your tokens. It means that if you have built a subnet that doesn't attract investment or makes it so miners are incentivized just to sell your token and not hold, the cost will be on your subnet and not TAO. On the other side of the pool, we will be measuring, using the pool, the absolute conversion rate between TAO and the subnet tokens, so we can see the price of each subnet token. We will normalize those values and then distribute TAO through the left-hand side of each of these pools and to produce liquidity. So over the next million tokens that are mined in TAO, most of them will situate themselves directly inside of these liquidity pools, giving liquidity for the miners and validators within each of the ecosystem, each of the subnets. The same goes for the right-hand side of the pools for the subnet tokens. So when a subnet is deregistered, it means that the price has dropped significantly low, which means that the pool has been drained and there's not much left in it. But at which point the pool will be liquidated with the TAO on the left-hand side of the pool distributed proportionally to the subnet token owners. So if it were to happen instantaneously, there would be no loss, for instance, for an owner in the case that they were registered and then deregistered immediately, which is a nice caveat. One of the interesting things about this particular mechanism via the swapping pool is that the price denominated in US dollars of the tokens mined within inside of the subnet right after the switch from TAO to the subnet token remains exactly the same. The difference is that if there's a large outflow of the subnet tokens through the miners and through the subnet, the price will drop, and that fact will change. Okay, that was a mouthful. So that was the heading. Hopefully somebody recorded that.
Okay, you're still with me? Confusing, right? I must have listened to that clip God knows how many times, because there's numbers going all over the place. So what the hell is a liquidity pool? I know some of us know that already, but there are a lot of newer crypto people here, so I'll talk about that. And why did the foundation push this update that no one was asking for? So first of all, let's attack the liquidity pool thing. And I actually find this a hard concept to explain. It's one of those things in crypto which I know what a liquidity pool is. Hell, I used to play with liquidity pools on the Phantom network back in the last DeFi summer, was it 2.0? But it's one of those things where I don't know it deep enough to really fully explain. So I have to really put it into basic terms, and I'm going to use cookies. So when you create a liquidity pair, you basically put two and two tokens together. So in this example, let's say I am a baker, and I've got two types of cookie in my bakery. And by the way, the baker or the bakery acts as the AMM. So you'll probably hear of things like an AMM, which is an automatic market maker. So that's the baker, that's me. And so I've got chocolate chip and I know white chocolate chip. You can't see the white ones there though. And so these like tokens in a liquidity pool. Both cookies are equally delicious and they are the same number. So we've got 10 in each here. So let's say someone walks in and they're hungry and they want 10 white cookies. Let's say they want 5. So they take 5 and all of a sudden there's an imbalance in the amount of cookies, right? So what happens is, and by the way, let's say this bakery always wants to keep things even, and by the end of the day, the baker, wants to make sure we sell all of the cookies. So if we get rid of, damn it, we need some sort of pen here. All this preparation, and I forgot that I'm going to be needing to doodle shizzle. So 5 cookies disappear. Now me as the baker, like, oh, okay, there's a bit of an imbalance here. I want to, and no one's touching my my normal milk chocolate chip cookies. What we're going to do is actually drop the price. So the price of this goes lower because I want to. And by default, the price of this is going to go, I'm going to make the price of this higher. So I'm going to try and incentivize customers to try and buy these cookies to try and even it out. So me as the automatic market maker, I'm constantly playing with the price of the cookies up and down to try and maintain that 50-50 balance, or that ratio. So the clear all drawings. So yeah, and this is what's like a crypto liquidity pool. People put their crypto into the pool, and others can use it to trade tokens by taking some out, some in, and the prices of each token changes based on how can I explain this? The prices change based on how much of a token is in the pool. And you have to understand that the prices that are in these pairs are not representative of the spot price exactly. So I'll come back to the liquidity pool stuff in a bit, but that's just the very, very basics of it. So why did they push this update? Well, quick answer is game theory. The two founders of BitTensor are incredibly clever data scientists. That one's ex-Google and the other's an AI scientist, and they are obsessed with game theory. That's why they've built BitTensor under the whole premise of game theory and open, fair competition and incentives. And they realize that at the moment there are some issues with the whole ecosystem, especially in the subnets. So in order to really grow as a network of intelligence, they needed to eject and stop the detractors, anchors, and the freeloaders within the network. And they are the validator weight copiers and also the subnets that aren't innovating or performing. So for example, if you take a weight copier, what happens? Well, no, let's take a normal validator, right? A validator is taking in the requests from the user, they're sending them to the miner, and then they are ranking the outputs from the miners, right? Just like I explained on the first slide. And a validator also gets a big chunk of the daily emissions, and they have to choose what percentage of those emissions go to certain subnets, right? and some validators just may equally give it to all the subnets. Some may focus more on others, but ultimately a good validator is doing work. So what you may come across with is the term weight copies. So these are validators that are, they'll come up with an amount of TAO and lock it up to become a validator, and then all they'll do is they'll just copy other validators' work. So if good validator is applying a certain emission allocation to certain subnets, the weight copiers will go, oh, I'm just going to do exactly the same, and they're basically getting almost the same rewards, but with doing no work. So you could literally be a validator right now, well, previous to this update, do no work and just copy the good validators, and that is what I call a bit of a freeloader. This is a validator that's not actually contributing any work or effort to the network. So that was one issue. And the other issue is that subnet, there have been some subnets that weren't really doing anything, because if you cast your mind back to the first explanation of BitTensor and the subnets, I was saying that how if you launched a new subnet, you would get, and even if you got a small allocation of the daily emissions, you could clear $20,000 to $50,000 a day just by getting some of those emissions. And so what happened is that there were some subnets that were launched with hey, we're launching XYZ protocol, send some allocation to us because we're gonna change the world and blah blah blah, but then they just quickly did nothing. So the foundation wanted a way to try and combat the weight copiers, and also try and use game theory to really put a hot red poker up everyone's arse to maintain innovation and progression, because at the moment we've only got 32 subnets. So effectively 32 different AI projects, completely different. And in order for BitTensor and TAO, the token, to do well, think of each subnet as a cylinder. We need all cylinders firing, and a car with some cylinders not firing or misfiring, it's going to slow the car down. It's not efficient. So the other reason is that weight copiers can lead to decentralization. Sorry, I've completely ballsed that up. Weight copiers can lead to centralization. That's a typo there. Weight copiers lead to centralization, because rewards may be concentrated among a few nodes with the best historical performance, and then discouraging diversity and independent validation. So it's not good. So basically, if everyone's copying all the best validators, all of a sudden all of the emissions and the allocations are going to being concentrated into some subnets. So yeah, that is not a good centralization thing. And then also reduced network security. So basically it might disincent. So how can I explain this? So a reliance on weight copying can make the network more vulnerable to attacks or manipulation, because bad actors could potentially introduce compromised weights, which are then replicated by others. So there's a way that one could game the system, so to speak, to basically direct emissions to the wrong places, so to speak. And then we've got decreased innovation and efficiency. As I said, if all cylinders aren't firing, it's not good. And so by weight copying, so by having these validators that are just doing no work and just copying other people, it disincentivizes validators from actually doing work and explore and actually improving algorithms and doing the proper running the algorithms and whatnot, and not exploring innovative training techniques or inference of some sort, or even disincentivizes hardware upgrading. So long story short, a bunch of issues, which I think it's good that they've introduced this new dynamic TAO system, because it just gets rid of weight copies straight away, and it's a kick up the arse for subnets to really go off and do their thing. So this is actually, it's turning BitTensor more into like what Ethereum was when they first launched the DApp platform, but with tweaks. So the solution, as you know, is this dynamic TAO subnets system. So, okay, what does it mean? So here we had that picture, and we're going to do an example of a good example. So let's just take decentralized distributed storage, a bit like Filecoin or Siacoin back in the day. So at the moment, the storage subnet here is subnet 7. So what happens is they're effectively giving each subnet more independence, right? So it's more like, hey, yeah, you've got the subnet, but you've got to run this like it's your own company, your own, etc., and you're going to, live or die by how well you do. And by the way, don't think that subnet 7 storage is just one thing. That subnet could have loads of different AI projects in that, all within the storage sector, right? So I mean, hell, you can have 20 different storage AI projects all launching, and then all of them would be then competing to see who gets the emissions, and they would, and so it's every way you look in BitTensor, there's open, fair competition and incentives to do better. So now we have this liquidity pool. So what happens is, let's just call it subnet 7 token. So I'll just call it S7 versus TAO. Now, the subnet token is not transferable. Okay, so if you were to launch a new company or a new app on the Ethereum network, and you create your own ERC20 token, that's a free-floating ERC20 token that you can sell anywhere. You go to exchanges, you can do all sorts of stuff with. This dynamic TAO token is non-transferable. The only way you can interact with that token is via the liquidity pool. So if the subnet's doing well, great, you can hoard it or you can sell it, but you can only sell it against TAO. Now, let's say let's say TAO is $300, and on issuance of this new liquidity pool, S7 token is also worth $300. Now, let's say subnet 7 or S7 does really well because there's an AI storage project within this subnet which is absolutely rocketing. It's taking on Dropbox and Google Cloud and all that sort of stuff, and it's getting real world users because it's giving, let's say it's doing everything that Dropbox is doing, but at 1/10 of the price, and completely decentralized, and only you own your data, all that sort of stuff. Well, this is going to attract real world users, and therefore this subnet token is going to increase in price, and therefore this TAO linking or the TAO price in this pairing will then decrease. So what then happens is that this subnet token may go up in price and then TAO goes down. So I guess so there's this positive flywheel here. So as more users flock to the subnet's application and services, the demand for its token naturally rises, and this increased utility creates a scarcity for the token, driving its price upwards, because miners and validators are going to want to hoard that token. So as Kant said in that video, if anyone wants to be a whale in a subnet, you got to get in early, and you effectively got to hodl. It's provided that subnet does well, and so holding that subnet token might, some of these subnet tokens may have extra privileges, so by holding that token, it might grant you access to exclusive features, or you may need to hold that token to even use whatever the service it is, and to get the benefits of that subnet. So it then further incentivizes the users and also investors, and when I say investors, I also mean the validators as well, to acquire it. There may be staking and governance, so many subnets may allow token holders to stake their tokens to earn more rewards. or participate in governance decisions, like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So this incentivizes long-term holding and adds another layer of value to that token, that dynamic TAO token. And also it will attract additional developers and other projects to that subnet. So a successful subnet with a rising token value becomes more attractive to developers and new projects, because this influx of talent and innovation just further fuels the growth of that subnet. And I guess another thriving benefit is that, another benefit to a thriving subnet is that it fosters a strong and, I guess, enthusiastic community who believe in its potential. And then I guess there's speculation. So as that token starts growing, it gains more traction and visibility. It will then gain, speculative interest from traders and whatnot, trying to, potentially arbit. And when a new so when a subnet does well and it attracts more people, let's say a new validator comes online, they've just discovered BitTensor and they're going, right, I need to focus on a good subnet because I want to put all my efforts and research and algorithm, innovation into a good subnet. So they find subnet 7, which is now rocketing up. In order to participate, that validator has to lock up a whole bunch of TAO into that subnet. So first of all, they have to go out and buy TAO on the open market, and as you know, there's only 10% of the free float available to buy, so they have to go and buy that TAO. Then they have to come in and lock it up on this network. So you must not think that a rising subnet token is bad for TAO, as in the main TAO. Let's call it global TAO. It's not. It's this positive flywheel. So now let's look at it in a bad way. Okay, let's say a subnet doesn't perform well. So going back to that picture, let's pick a random one, subnet 24. No one knows what subnet 24 is doing. Well, not when I did this presentation. And so same thing, let's call it S24 versus TAO in terms of that subnet. Originally, let's call it $300 each. And like before, this is either doing nothing, it was a land grab to get some cheap emissions quickly, and so what happens is everyone goes, oh shit, this subnet's doing nothing, I'm going to sell my S24 token because there's jack shit in here. So they sell it, and then obviously the price goes down. Now the AMM will try and balance it with a liquidity pool, but if this subnet's actually doing nothing, everyone is going to dump that S24, and they'll do it quickly. And what happens is when it gets to a certain threshold, a really low threshold, that subnet is then discontinued. And they've put other incentives for this to not happen, because in order to set up a subnet, you have to basically lock in a shit ton of TAO in order to do that. So it's disincentivizing bad actors from doing that sort of quick land grab in the first place, because they got to lock up, tens of thousands of dollars worth of TAO. So they're not going to do that. So let's go through, I guess, that thought process again, and let's try and look at the negative flywheel of it all. So if it's shit, it's going to see a declining user base, as in less user engagement. It's going to have technical issues. The demand for that token, so S24, is naturally going to fall. And then it creates an abundance of supply relative to demand, putting downward pressure on that token, like I just said. And so if the initial promises of that subnet then fail to materialize, it's just going to lose attention, and people are going to dump it. So what else is there? And again, it's just everything I said on the last one, the opposite will happen. So it won't attract traders, it won't attract validators waiting, as in validators will just ignore it and won't allocate any of the daily emissions to that subnet. It won't attract any core developers. There won't be any innovation, and that's why they've got this minimum threshold to discontinue that subnet if it doesn't perform. So yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. And then eventually, you know, it could get really, really bad, and to the point where it's so lopsided that, yeah, they just kill it. So there's a new dynamic in place. So the miners and validators have to walk an even tighter rope these days. So let's start with the miners first. So miners need to be careful to not dump too much of that new subnet token in exchange for TAO, because some people may be like, oh cool, I've got a whole bunch of this new subnet token, I like TAO, I was in here for TAO in the first place, screw it, I'm going to sell all this silly subnet token, I just want TAO. Now the issue behind that thinking, which is flawed thinking in terms of a game theory perspective, or just logic really, is because this then devalues that miner's standing and contributions within that subnet. So a miner needs to have locked up and own enough of that subnet token to be heard, so to speak. So in a rising subnet, in order to be, for that miner to be front and center and hey, look at my emission, look at my outputs, rank me please, they need to, they either need to hoard the subnet token, which by the way, don't forget, is still beneficial to TAO, or they need to have to go out and buy more TAO and then come into that liquidity pool and swap it to get that subnet token. Again, either way, it's good for TAO. It's quite ingenious when you get your head around this. So let's look at the validators now. The validators, they also are now having to play a different game, because beforehand, validators would, a lot of validators would just, sort of spread their weight across most of the subnets. They're like, oh, I like that, yeah, let's spread it across, etc. But remember, if you're, you have to run a different algorithm per subnet, because, an image generation protocol is going to be completely different to a data scraping one, or a text to voice, voice to text subnet, all that sort of stuff. Sorry. And so validators now have to be more strategic and focus their weight and validating, and also time, money and attention onto one or two subnets, because it makes little sense for them to basically spread themselves thin and not have a clue in, across everything. So what we will see now is validators really honing in on the good subnets, because if I'm a validator, I want to make sure I'm locking up my money in the right subnet, as in a rising subnet, and I'm helping innovate in that subnet to keep it going. So once I've basically bet on my horse, one or two horses, I'm going to put all my efforts to make sure that I innovate in that subnet, do well, rank the miners properly, look after the users properly, all that sort of stuff. And guess what? Going back to that incentivizing competition, if a subnet or two starts doing really, really well, they're going to start attracting most of that daily emission weighting, and so they get more. So it then starts breeding more competition from the other subnets to, hey, we need to start booming. So yes, validators will act more like shrewd investors these days, and focus on the good ones. So all in all, it's just a positive flywheel for TAO, as in the token that we all own. And the thing that's really getting my juices going is that, being a trader, I see opportunities now. Subnet arbitrage, baby. I need to look. So I need to get my head. I'm still getting my head around this. I admit I don't know it 100%. But as a trader, I know that there will be opportunities that we can arbitrage, where we can buy. You can use the AMM. Because the AMM is always going to try and maintain a 50-50 liquidity pool. So there may be opportunities where we can buy in a subnet token and then and do some quick flip flops. Potentially see a subnet that's likely going to boom, get a whole bunch of that subnet token relatively early, and then when that price starts booming, then swap it in for TAO, and then you get more TAO for your money. And then what's going to happen is that the AMM is going to rebalance the liquidity pool. You can then effectively buy that subnet token again, and then wait for more pumpage, so to speak. So instead of sidestepping into other stuff, I could be doing subnet arbitrage and sidestepping between a subnet token and TAO. So there's all sorts of ideas here. Now, I don't have any clear, there's nothing to trade just yet that I can see. It's still very early days. But, easy ones would be text generation, picture generation, all that sort of stuff. Stuff that, most people understand. So there's definitely going to be some beautiful arbitraging. But even better, this is why I think it's so big. I think this is going to be the first proper disconnecting from the main markets. As we've seen for years and years, everything follows the main markets. Bitcoin follows the main markets. Bitcoin pretty much is 80% correlated with the S&P 500 and the global liquidity cycle and all that sort of stuff. And so when Bitcoin goes up and down, all the other alts go up and down, right? We all know that. Well, with this new subnet play and the new dynamic TAO stuff, I actually think this is going to be the first step where TAO becomes eventually completely disconnected to the main markets, because TAO's price will only go up and down based on the success of the subnets or an individual token within a subnet. So I think this is pretty mega. So this is my basic explanation and understanding of this new change. Obviously everything is pretty new. Let's quickly have let's stop the share. I want to get the chat box up.